Welcome to Inside the Director Circle and this episode on hiring for a high-performing team. I'm Jason Langford-Brown, your host, founder of the Director Circle and practicing business advisor and coaching psychologist. We all aspire to have high-performing teams working for us, but that needs to start with hiring with that end in mind. So today is all about giving you some insights and practical tips on how you might achieve this and get the right team in place from the get-go. To help us with this, we are, as always, delighted to welcome one of our knowledge partners from the Director Circle to add some expertise to this subject. Today we are joined by Joe Keeler, Managing Director of Belbing, one of the world's leading and probably most respected behavioural and team profiling providers. And to add a practical element to the discussion, our business leader members from the Director Circle today are Matt Jones, serial scale-up businessman and founder and Managing Director of Oxbridge, a leading online college and edtech business. Alongside him is Naeem Alvi-Asinda, founder and managing director of Notepad, award-winning and one of the fastest growing branded agencies in the UK. And just very quickly, before we get into the discussion, remember this is just a snapshot of what happens within our business leader community at the Director Circle. So if you want to get more involved or you want more insights, tools or support, visit directors-circle.com and click on Join the Community button. But without further ado, to get into today's discussion, I really wanted to start with you, Joe. Hi, Joe. Great to have you with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So, Joe, I wanted to get this conversation going really with our own high-performing model of team performance. There's a number of key elements on there, and one of them is around blend of types. And I think when business leaders think of blend of types and hiring for a high-performing team, they're obviously thinking with the role in mind. What role do I need this person to do in the team? But when we talk about this in our model, we talk about blend of types is beyond the role. It's also about the behaviours that a team needs to display, and those blend of behaviours, and also even moving into things like EQ as well. So I thought it would be really good to start. Just, I think, give people a view of what Belbing is very briefly, and what's your view on this blend of types, beyond the role?
Brilliant. No, thank you. Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? Is teamwork we talk about actually that diversity is key. Sometimes we think about that, don't we, in terms of job roles. We want different types of functions within that team. But we also need different types of behaviours. So the way in which you approach work, the way in which you approach other people, for a team to be truly, truly successful. The research shows that the most successful teams have a diverse range of behaviours, and there's 9 different behaviours, 9 clusters of behaviours that you need, and we call each of these a Belbing team role. So, for example, you might be quite familiar with some of the terminology. People tend to know the name completer finisher, for example, which is that really high anxiety role, the one that makes sure that everything is absolutely correct. And then you also have a shaper role, the role that's got that high energy and drive and will challenge and make everything done very, very quickly. Now, if, for example, you had a team which was just of that shaper role, just of really high energy, challenging, come on, let's get it done behaviours, you can imagine that team may do quite well in the short term, but longer term, it might be a nightmare because getting all that sort of similar behaviour working together can be really, really hard. There'll be blood on the walls, for example. So that's why we really want is a different mix of different behaviours to really make sure that the team's got not just what it needs now, but also what it's got for the future.
So what's the research say, Joe, about the difference in performance between people that focus on those different behaviours versus the different skills, which is probably where most people would spend their time?
Yeah, no, absolutely. All of the research that was carried out at Henley Business College, they had an exercise, and what they were doing is that they were working out which the most successful teams were after playing this particular exercise. And one time they put all of the people together with really high IQ. They thought these are the right people, put them all together, they're going to be the most successful team. Actually, during the studies, they found that those teams did really badly. They didn't even average it. They were really, really quite poor. They then thought, okay, so let's put all of those really hard-working traits together. And again, great, but difficult when perhaps a bit of difference was needed, a bit of change came in. So one by one, they realised that these teams of all similar people, and sometimes, job titles, you can recruit similar people because you do something called cloning. I'm really good in this role. If I want somebody to be good in this role, I'll just recruit another one of me, thank you. And that can be a problem. But the research shows that actually you do need that diversity. And they got to a point, actually, that they were able to predict a success of a team by looking at that diversity with an over 80% accuracy. knowing that that team had those diverse behaviours.
Yeah, fascinating.
And it's not just us, actually. There's studies out there galore that talk about the diversity in behaviours, cognitive diversity being key into really helping those teams succeed.
And you maybe then start to see where that whole phrase, getting the team being more than the sum of the parts, starts to come from. I'm interested in that cloning piece. Now, maybe this is the point to maybe bring Matt in here, because I've seen this with my own clients. We do tend to recruit in our own image because we see ourselves as successful. We want more of what we do. And I've got one particular client that had a team of shapers, as you call it, and they actually were really, really successful for 3 or 4 years in quite a large organisation. And then I got a call because it was going off a cliff. And after we did some Belbin profiling, interestingly enough, we kind of went, oh God, we've got a team of shapers here, so that's interesting. But what we were more into why it worked, and it turned out that they were actually in a lot of trouble when they first started off their journey. So I think it actually helped them in that kind of in those first few years when they were trying to turn the ship around, so to speak. But the minute they normalised, it very quickly started to turn back on them. So Matt, I'm just wondering, for you, have you got any kind of insights from actually, in the business in terms of having a team that's all the same, or using different behaviours as opposed to skills?
See, I guess traditional thinking is, look, I'm going to hire people that fit a certain culture profile. They all feel like the kind of people I want to work with, I want to go and have lunch with. But actually, that's probably one of the worst things that any manager or team leader or board member can do. What you really want, I know we talk about diversity on boards, but I think that goes so much deeper as well, because what we actually want is not a team full of yes people, because that's ultimately if everyone's the same, everyone ends up being a yes person, and that is a really dangerous place to be, because what you actually want is respectful challenge within the team, and making sure that people have got different viewpoints is really, really important. And that's again why what Joe was saying, it's really important to make sure there is a diversity of thinking on a team, because that actually makes them really strong. And that whole, being better than some of your parts is so true in that situation.
Yeah. And I think, what you get into there, Matt, I know you and I have talked about this before, is we start moving to that world where we start looking to build a prickly team, which I know is language that Joe's familiar with as well. And no, but I don't know about, for you, you've got a very, very fast growing team. So I'm sure you've had some challenges around there. Has any of this resonate with you in terms of your journey as you've been building the team at Notepad, which I know has been growing very, very quickly? But I'm also interested because, as a brand agency, you're doing a lot of work with clients' teams as well, embedding new brands, new cultures. Any insights from there that you could share with us at this point?
Yeah, I think that everything we've just spoken about rings so true of my own experience. I think when I started hiring for Notepad, I very selfishly hired people that I just wanted to spend time with. Because if I'm going to have to work with these people every day, I might as well hire some really lovely people. And I think as we grew, it's fine when we were 4 or 5 people, but as we grew, you start to recognize that you've basically got 4 or 5 people that think exactly the same way. So still, all of the whole point of me hiring was to try and relinquish some of that responsibility and some of that workload. But actually what happened was I was still just making all the decisions and deciding on what work we were going to do, and then they were doing the work. So totally can see the value in introducing diverse thought, and it's kind of made me want to do some Belbin profiling, to be honest. I'd like to understand where we lack. I think where I think I've been fortunate is because I've helped agencies grow in the past as an employee. I've been able to see the different skills that would be needed for those different roles. And I don't know if this is true or not, but it feels like, say, a project manager, the project manager we've hired is incredible. Big shout out to Abby. But she is definitely one of those completer finisher types. That is her natural skill set. And maybe that's why she was drawn to a career in project management. So I feel like we've probably been quite lucky in the hires we've made based on skills and cultural fit, making sure that they align with our values, but not thinking so much about their behaviors, but probably something we need to do more as we scale up.
Great. Okay. So Joe, in terms of, we're talking about recruitment here. Where do we start? Where do business leaders start in terms of the journey of how to recruit for that high performing team that's got that blend of behaviors, that's prickly, whatever language you want to use? You
start slowly and you don't jump in. I think the amount of work that you can do beforehand really does help increase the odds of getting somebody that you really do need. So it's finding out, first of all, what the team is there to achieve. So are you recruiting at board level? Are you recruiting at any other? Is it a project? You've got a project that you're recruiting for at the moment, because different teams have different needs. So really analysing what the team is there to do, what's its objectives, what's its timescales, and then spending time working out what you already have within the team. You don't necessarily, like we said, want to recruit more of the same, but do you need every single one of those 9 behaviours? And we can all play about 2 or 3 of these roles really well. It could be that sometimes people just need to put a different hat on to fill some gaps or what have you. So really spend time looking at what you've got, and also spend time really looking at the people's who will be managing them. Will they be managing other people? Who are going to be their main co-workers? And looking and predicting, what kind of person is going to make the best out of those relationships. Then start looking. And what we tend to say is, you need the skills, but they're not everything. As long as somebody's got about 60% of the skills that you need, that's great. Then start looking at what behaviours do you need. And if you can get a balance between the two, that's really what you're looking for. If you get just skills, but the behaviour doesn't fit, it's going to be a bad fit for the team. If you get somebody who's got all of the skills and all of the behaviour, they'll probably be great, but won't stay around for too long because they'll be looking for another challenge. It might be a bit too easy for them. So obviously, if you've got neither, you wouldn't go anywhere near them. What you're really looking for are people who've perhaps got so much behavioural characteristics, and you leave enough room to train them in the skills that they don't have. And that's where people start developing and growing. And that's where you tend to have real long stayers and people who really contribute towards the future of the team. But just do your homework would be my one key point. Do your homework. Really work out what you need first.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting insight there about bringing people on that have got room to grow, because I think we all aspire to get the perfect employee, don't we, really? But that's interesting. People are motivated by growth and progression. And if there's none of that to be had, then are they going to stay around? I think the point I picked up there as well is that, don't get one of everything. It's not about collecting all the cards in the pack. Actually, we've all got to be adaptable and cover the bases. But so it's a bit of self-awareness, that, isn't it? Really, being self-aware about what we need and where we're going. I mean, Matt, you've used things like Belbin in the recruitment process. Kind of how's it worked for you, or where are some of the pitfalls where it hasn't worked for you, where maybe it should have done?
And to follow on from what Joe said, for me, it's all about hiring slow and firing fast. And I think actually a lot of people are very keen to fill a gap and not thinking about the homework that needs to be done in order to find and spec out the right person. I'm not saying we should spend months on it, but actually it's really important to spec that out from the start, because actually when you know what you're looking for, it's much easier to define that role. So profiling is really important in my hiring process. So I tend to, I actually use Belbin myself, and we tend to stick a Belbin test in halfway through our hiring process. And that gives me lots of insight then on, is this person actually, are they showing those values actually that they're saying that they've got? Owning and running a training company, I'm very aware that I can teach people skills. That's the easy bit. Actually, the difficult bit is getting those values and beliefs at the start and finding people that fit those profiles. That's the difficult bit. And actually, if you can get that bit right, the other bit is fairly straightforward. But certainly with people with room to grow is really important as well.
Yeah. And I mean, just maybe from that, Matt, and maybe Joe can come in on this, is I see it really useful. I think as you picked up on, Matt, to sort of sense check what you think you've got in front of you. So this is what I thought I saw, and is the profile telling me the same? But I think then going into the next interview, Joe, using that to inform what questions you asked to get a deeper understanding at a level maybe people don't want to admit or don't know how to admit, is really useful, I would think.
Yeah, it is, absolutely, because the questionnaires, and it's the same for any test, isn't it? The questionnaire somebody fill in during an interview process. It's about themselves. And anybody, who's on it, who really wants a job, they've gone on your website, they're going to know what the job is, they're going to know roughly what it is that you're looking for. And so that will be in mind when they're completing these questionnaires. So in theory, if they've got enough about them, you should be quite happy with their profile. But that gives you some great questions to really probe. That's what it does. It says, right, so you say you are high implementer behaviour. They're the ones who like process, Excel spreadsheets, really hard working. give me an example when you had to turn somebody's ideas into a practical project. What did you do? How did you stop all the talk and turn it into practical action? Give me some ideas. So hopefully, if they're as high implementers as they've said they are, they'll be able to say, right, and use a word like Gantt charts or whatever they are, and work told you how they did it. If they go, can't remember, then perhaps they haven't got those behaviours that you thought that they had. So having that extra, but I mean, recruitment, it's all about, I think, a jigsaw. And everything is adding in another piece, isn't it? And Belbran's is adding in another piece. You've got loads of others. You wouldn't just use, just one tool for that. And it's giving you those questions and those ideas at an interview stage of really where to probe and find out a little bit more about the behavioural side.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah, because I think it is. I think you're right, Joe. Getting it right 100% is not realistic, but it's about reducing the risk, isn't it? Really, because the cost of getting it wrong is huge, which is why I love both of your comments about slowing it down. Because I see so many people rushing it, yet the cost of getting it wrong is massive, and the time lost is massive as well. So I think just on that risk thing, I'm just conscious you see lots of teams. You've got your own team, and you see lots of teams out there as well. What when you see a great team, what does it look like? What are the things that pop into your head? And I probably caught you on the hoof there.
No, it's a great question. It's one of those things that is always hard to articulate, but it's easy to feel, isn't it? I think when you walk into a company with a great, energized, empowered team, there is just kind of a buzz and a sense of excitement for where they're going, and you know that they've got it right. Not perfect, but they've got most of the elements right. What's been so fascinating me in terms of team dynamic is we work with all sorts of size organizations, but over the last 2 years, we've really focused on working with high kind of growth tech companies or scaling tech companies, a lot of which are investment backed. So they have to, prove rapid growth in numbers, rapid growth in team size. And, without mentioning any specific companies, what's been fascinating to see is the absolute disastrous impact of that approach. So just kind of, we've got £2 million in the bank. We know all the roles we need to hire for. Let's hire them all at once, and let's just find people to fill those roles. And it's speaking about that feeling when you walk in, you walk into a company like that that's grown at that rate in 2 years, and is over 100 people. There's always a sense of kind of despondency and a lack of engagement that you can feel in the company. And I think it's just because they kind of are positioned from very early on as a sort of small cog in this massive machine, and they're filling a role, and it's a short-term window, and they're growing the company to sell it. And it kind of it always makes me think about, there's a really good book actually that I'd recommend called Small Giants, and it's the idea of growing really successful smaller companies. It doesn't have to be about explosive growth all the time. And if you read that book, the main thing I kind of took from it is just every one of these companies has got it right in terms of culture. They just know exactly what they're about. They hire, like you're both saying, they hire slowly. They hire great behavioral and cultural type people, and they just build these really high performing teams, and they're happy with the level they've got to. And some of those companies are still 200 employees, but in the grand scale of comparing them to a corporate global organization, they're tiny. So that was really eye-opening for me. And actually, even with Notepad's growth, our plan is to go no further than 40 people with Notepad, just because I've worked in massive agencies, I've worked in tiny agencies, and I think about 40 is kind of a sweet spot for our industry in terms of creativity and productivity. That's kind of what we're aiming for.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting what you just said. That I think all that leads into Joe's point earlier about actually having your end and your objective in mind. And of course, it's got to be your objective, not someone else's. this kind of view that we all have to aspire to be something that everybody else is just ridiculous, isn't it? Matt, I just thought maybe just if you could just share with us when you get it wrong, what's the cost of that for you in your business? What kind of impacts do you see? What's the fallout?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, nobody gets it right 100% of the time, me included, and sometimes it does go wrong. And that's usually down to the hiring process, actually. And I've done a lot of work on our hiring process over the last couple of years. And it matures every year. It matures every time we do it. But is there a right or a wrong answer to that? No, there's not. But when it goes wrong, I mean, take it to the, just be completely brutal about it. If you hire the wrong person, the first problem that you've got is that they disrupt the apple cart, so to speak, so that nice balance, that culture, that real level of trust that hopefully you've instilled within a business gets disrupted, and that ultimately affects end performance. But then the problem is that you're potentially 2, 3, 4 months down the line, and this wrong person is still there, and that can be quite toxic to an organisation, and it can come from one person. So you have to be very careful with that. So yeah, when it goes wrong, it's not just it's not just localized to one role. That spreads across various roles, and of course, keeping teams aligned as well is a really big challenge, and that can certainly affect that as well. So, we just going back onto this concept of prickly teams. I talk to you about it all the time, Jason, and it's so important to make sure that team is prickly, essentially, and it's all about respectful challenge as well. Now, if you've got that mixture right within a team and an organization, hopefully whatever level that team is at, they can call out those kinds of inconsistent behaviors, and actually you can start to pick those up really quickly.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Matt. And I'm sure we're going to pick up on some of those. We're doing a podcast after this, staying on with the theme of high-performing teams, but going into how we can actually help them be more effective. And I think there's alignment and there's prickly issues I think we're going to pick up again then. We've got to wrap it up for this episode, but I think there's some great insights there from all of you. I really appreciate, as always, those insights. I think what I'm hearing in summary is that we obviously need to recruit for people who have the skills to do the job, and obviously cultural alignment we all know is really, really important. But I think having that objective of what the team needs to achieve once they're on board. But I think the big message I'm hearing here is we need to slow down the process, get the process right, slow it down, and inject that behavioural check through Belbin or some other means to make sure that we get the right people to build this blend up. So maybe can I just finish off? Maybe just if each of you had to give me one tip that you'd give for hiring a high-performing team, what would your one tip be? Naim, could I maybe start with you on that one?
I think we've been fortunate in that our hiring process is quite slow, and maybe it's because I take a while to make decisions around people. But I can only advocate for that, really. And also, one thing we do is we get outside of the normal bounds of what a typical interview process would be. So go to lunch with them, go for a walk with them, kind of spend time with them outside of a work environment, really get to understand them as a person. So yeah, I would try and bend the interview process to work for you.
Yeah, nice tip. Thank you. Matt?
Completely follow on from that. Look, the reality is that people are prepped and they're coached to go to interview, and they're used to it. So for me, very much so, take them outside of that existing process. And lunch is a great way to do that. You really get to get under someone's skin. But I think for me, outside of all processes, you have to trust your gut, and your gut tells you a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt. Joe?
Do your homework, then do a bit more homework. And also, don't take the responsibility on just as one person. We all see different things, and I think what we need to do is get other people involved in the process. So it isn't just your eyes, isn't just your gut.
Yeah.
You have other people involved as well. Spread the risk a little bit, but then do a bit more homework again after that.
Yeah, I agree, Joe. I think my tip would be, interviewing a hostess on your own is dangerous. So yeah, my top tip would be, at the very least, get at least 2 people on that second interview. So you've got 2 people's views and independently score before you come together with your opinion. Absolutely. Thank you again, all of you, for your time today. Fascinating as ever. In our next episode, as I mentioned a few moments ago to Matt, we're going to talk about how we can help our teams work together more effectively. So listen out for that in the coming weeks. For those who want more information on this subject, particularly around the Belbin, obviously reach out to Belbin. Joe, I'm sure will be delighted to hear from you. Another one of our knowledge partners, Lucid, is one of their accredited partners. So you can contact them at lucid-group.com. But until the next episode, thank you for listening to Inside the Director's Circle.